for group number 1 to come up and present your recommendation.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you can hear because sometimes it stops.
You present.
Yeah, there has to be. You
would never present. Good idea, that's what's so.
I think it's important for me to say that this role was forced upon me. I did it under duress. But our group is dealing with the question, what are the strategies that we can adopt to influence the drafting process for the Access to Information Bill in Namibia? So we came up with 4 easy steps. We think it's easy? Yeah. So we came with 4 easy steps. And step 1 is we have to first identify key stakeholders. The ones that we managed to identify, it's definitely a lot more, but we did manage to identify, for instance, civil society organizations, the media, academia, the Anti-Corruption Commission, filmmakers, international development partners, the public as well as...
Slowly,
Oh.
slowly.
Sorry. So step 1 is to identify key stakeholders. Some of the key stakeholders we thought should be involved in this process are, for instance, the Namibia Bar or Law Society, civil society organizations, the media, academia, lecturers and such, the Anti-Corruption Commission, filmmakers, international development partners, and members of the public. Of course, there's a lot more we can mention, but I think we all know. We also thought that in the very first process, it's very important for advocacy involving the stakeholders and the government around the issue that's going to be raised on the bill to happen. So it's important to make the government feel included in this whole process so that they don't feel that they're the ugly stepchild. Step 2, we thought the next best thing to do is to identify key issues that we want reflected in the ATI bill. And this process, step 2, should be guided by established principles of both international and regional law on access to information. So a scope and research would have to be done around best practices and existing laws in the region and beyond and internationally, and how they work for the benefit of the country at the time. So that's what we have to look at to see what we want included in the Namibian bill and what we want excluded. Step 3 is where the bill is taken to the Ministries of ICT, Information and Communication Technology, I think in Namibia, and the Ministries of Justice, as well as the sitting committee or whatever's formed from the group in step 1, involves the Ministries of Justice and ICT in a consultative drafting process. And we mentioned, a member of my group mentioned that the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Law would have to be involved in this process apparently because they need to make sure that the language is consistent for laws in Namibia. And also consultation with the Law Reform Commission of Namibia, who are responsible, for instance, for amending and repealing and addition of laws in Namibia. And this is also as much part of step 3 as it is of step 2, where a comparative study of other ATI laws should be included in this whole process. So it's just taking the good and always trying to reflect the importance of the ATI law and what it's done for other countries and why it's important for Namibia. And we omitted a step that involved bribing government officials. We thought maybe, step 4 is step 4 is publicity and lobbying and maintaining pressure on the need for access to information law in Namibia. So this kind of fed into question 2, where even still in the drafting process, we have to start, creating hype around why this bill is being drafted and why it's important and why it's relevant for you, me, and everybody. And we mentioned that it's extremely important for it to be a participatory process where it's not a top-down thing where somebody woke up in the morning and the bill has been passed and they have no idea what it's for. So consistent and constant engagement with the stakeholders and the public should be is important, is fundamental in the popularization of the draft bill. And this is done through public meetings and media and press releases and we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's been some really great suggestions. I'm glad you left out the bribery part. But yeah, I think definitely in terms of you really looked at it holistically in terms of the different stakeholders that you have to take on, in terms of the content of the actual bill, in terms of the process, and I think also in terms of the publicity and awareness.
There's one addition. As part of the research into laws of Liberia to identify those that inhibit access to information so that the draft can respond to those other laws and provisions. I don't know whether it's clear. That's in Liberia.
Existing laws that inhibit
Namibia.
Was it under this section scope of existing laws that inhibit ATI?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll hand over to group 2 and look at the advocacy activities around access to information. Do we have a rapporteur?
They haven't decided.
Okay, we were looking at what advocacy strategies can be adopted to ensure passage of a strong access to information law in Namibia. We looked at quite a number, but obviously the list is not exhaustive. We knew brilliant-minded people like you would come up with some, so this is just a teaser. The rest of the good ones, I'm sure, are still there with you. The first one, we said obviously we would want to educate the public so that they are aware and buying into the campaign, and they are aware of what the importance of an access to information law for the public. So in particular, we thought it's important that we demystify access to information so that it's no longer viewed as a right for the media. I've heard it explained somewhere else as the demedification of access to information. I'm sure there's no such word in the dictionary, but what we are aiming to. Want to? Okay, I'm back. Yeah, so we thought one of the most important strategies is to ensure that the public understand and appreciate that this right is for them and not just for the media. Secondly, we also thought it's important to ensure buy-in by all civic society organizations into the campaign, as well as so that they have an appreciation of why it's important for Namibia to have an access to information bill. In other words, the strategy would be to ensure that the right of, or the issues around access to information are sort of mainstreamed in all basic human rights issues. So we would expect that this campaign would be taken to all levels of civic society so that they amplify these issues in their different sectors. Thirdly, we also thought it would be important to identify influential parliamentarians to push this agenda. I think Edison has already made, if I'm not mistaken, it was him who also pointed out the importance of identifying which parliamentarians would be sort of accepting of this campaign. So that's one of the other strategies that we also identified, singling out influential parliamentarians that will use to push this agenda constantly in Parliament and at various forums. Fourthly, we thought it is important to come up with simplified, not only simplified versions of the campaign and the bill, but also a summary version of the bill that would be used to and be given to, for example, parliamentarians. One of the members in our group mentioned that our parliamentarians do not read. The last time I heard that was in Zimbabwe, and I was quite surprised to hear this comment coming from our Liberian counterparts or colleagues, so to speak. So we thought, yes, it's important that the bill as well as the campaign are summarized so that when our parliamentarians look at it, they are able to just see what this is all about, what are the main issues, and hopefully they are keen to take them over. Our fifth point is on provision of technical support to legislature. And I must confess that I was listening with one ear when this point was being discussed, and perhaps Samson can expand on that later on. And then the sixth point was on ensuring that the campaign is a topical issue at all forums so that it remains on the agenda. So really, the strategy is to ensure that whether it's at the churches, what are they called, rallies, it would be one key strategy to ensure that the campaign and the issue of the need of an access to information law remains a topical issue at all fora so that it remains on the agenda and in the faces of the legislature. And then 7, we thought it would be important to make use of various modes of the media to disseminate information, for example, SMSs. We have already heard that this was quite a success in Nigeria, and also making use of community radios as an example. But importantly, the issue is being able to identify what sort of media, what sort of methods of the media would be useful in each community. For some it would be SMSs, for some it would be emails, for some it would be community radios, and perhaps for some it would be flyers. So yeah, it's really being able to make use of a concoction of strategies. And then the 8th point would be making use of influential people, such as celebrities, as a target, for example, for the youth. And then there was another point on petitions. I can't really remember how this was expanded. Perhaps it was taking petitions to the legislatures, I should like to think. And then lastly, we thought it would be important to engage legislators at their constituent level. Yeah. I think these are some of the things that we were able to come up with. Perhaps my group members will be able to expand on some of them.
Thank you, Jackie. I think also you've come up with some really good advocacy strategies. I think we've definitely learned a lot from what both Ed and Malcolm came up with today in terms of strategies moving forward. You can see a lot of influence from what they said earlier. And I think it's great to see that we can possibly learn from what's happened in other very successful campaigns. But with that, I think we're going to move on to our next section, which is where we plan in terms of what we're going to do going forward to get this access to information campaign underway. So I'm going to hand over to Kulani.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. Thank you. The two groups that worked on this. I think at this point of the program, we're right at the end of it, we'd like to tie up everything that we've discussed today, particularly the recommendations that were made by the groups on what could be the elements of an effective strategy for advancing access to information in Namibia. Now, we need to think about the next steps. Where to from here? I'd like to believe that the campaign group will work on those ideas and see if we come up with a program of action going forward that will be shared with interested parties and stakeholders. But even more important than the program of action are our own personal commitments towards this campaign. And this is what I would like you to start thinking about now. Before we do so, I'm going to distribute some lovely Namibian postcards to you and give you instructions. And this is when Edith says, there he goes again with his tricks. He always says, I trick people into doing things. There is no trick to this. All I will ask you is just to write your address. We're already compiling a database of our friends and supporters. So I will give you a postcard. Please write your name and address at the back of the postcard. See that? I'll give you about 2 minutes to do that. We need to have your name and postal address. I will not proceed with the program until everyone has done so.